Good evening. Welcome to another edition of the 411 Talk Zone radio show, Red Pill Edition. I'm your host, Leon Jones. And in this segment, I'm going to talk about something that's very important because there are a number of us who don't understand what's going on out here when it comes to government. And government can make you or break you when it comes to a standard of living. Now, you've heard me mention terms that end in isms like Marxism, socialism, communism. But do you understand what those terms mean? Do you understand where those terms come from? Many of you don't. Now, in a video prior to last week, I talked about 6 types of government. Now, tonight, you're going to hear a repeat, or you're going to hear a review of those 6 types of governments that I talked about in a little bit more depth with an actual definition. So, the title of tonight's video is 16 Government Types, the Way Government Works. 16 government types, the way government works. The first type of government is what we know as a republic. Now, republic is a government whose authority is based on citizens' votes, which are represented by elected or nominated officials in elections, or we say these officials are basically chosen in free elections. When we talk about a republic, we talk about representative government. This is what we have in the United States. And the reason why the Electoral College was set up is so that every state gets representation. You don't want New York, or you don't want Chicago, or you don't want San Francisco deciding who's going to be your president. But when we talk about a republic, because the United States, some people call it a democracy. We're not a democracy. We're a republic. And remember, a republic has a government who's chosen by the people for the people. Now, the next term is democracy. Democracy means rules of the people. Now, the term today refers to a political system in which the people or their elected representatives govern themselves. A democracy is very dangerous. When people who are elected representatives govern themselves, they have too much power. Now, this type of government, I'm going to talk about the third type, is basically in the Middle East. That's called a theocracy. That's a government where priests rule in the name of God or by officials who are regarded as divinely guided or consistent with the principles of a particular religion. When I talk about a theocracy, an example would be Islam in the Middle East. Now, the fourth type is a autocracy, and that's a government controlled by absolute power and in the hands of a single person with minimal restraints on the decision and lack of any mechanism of popular control. An autocracy is similar to a monarchy, where you have a king. Then you have a technocracy. That's a government where scientists and technical experts are in control of the state and where rulers are selected on the basis of their knowledge or skill rather than wealth and power. Then you have one known as fascism. Fascism is basically a way of ruling that advocates total control of the people and seeks to promote ancestral and cultural values. And when we deal with fascism, that basically eradicates any foreign influences. Number 7, let's talk about anarchy. Anarchy is absolute lawlessness. To put it in a better definition, anarchy is a state of absence of law, a state of lawlessness and disorder, usually resulting from a failure of government. Again, you have Black Lives Matter, you have Antifa. They want to burn the system down as we know it because they believe this system is a failed system, and they want to come up with a new system. I don't know what that system is, but they think they know better than I do about what system is going to be better than the current system. Now, the current system as we know it here in the United States is flawed, but it is better than the previous ones I just defined. Because when we talk about anarchy, we have to move on to monarchy. Now, a monarchy is a government where supreme authority is vested in a single and usually hereditary figure, such as a king, and whose powers can vary from absolute to none at all. The King of England. This is why the United States became independent, because the United States didn't want to be ruled by a king. And the forefathers here in the United States set up this government, said it would be checks and balances. Now, the 9th type of government is known as an oligarchy. Now, an oligarchy is what we know as rule of the few. It is a form of power structure in which power effectively rests with a faction of persons or families. We're talking about individuals who have a lot of wealth. These individuals can buy their way into politics. They can use their wealth to influence decisions of public officials who have been elected by us. They can influence laws. Look at George Soros. Look at Bill Gates. Look at Twitter. Look at Mark Zuckerberg. Look at Oprah. These individuals have a lot of money. And when we have individuals with money, they can basically buy government, and they can make rules that are beneficial to them, but those rules can make us poor if we allow it. The 10th form of government is known as a plutocracy. That's government ruled by the rich or power provided by wealth, often used to describe a wealthy class ruling a government, often from behind the scenes. We can almost connect a plutocracy and an oligarchy together because, again, when we talk about oligarchy, some powerful families ruled this country. And I can name you one right offhand. The Kennedys. Well, the Bushes as well. Because both the Bush brothers, Jeb Bush and George Bush, they were governors. George Bush and the father, they were presidents of the United States. When we deal with plutocracy, we deal with people who have a lot of money. Again, plutocracy and oligarchy, they're basically close to being the same because the people who have the power are basically rule of the few because their power and influence can keep them in power. And when you have plutocracies and oligarchies, you don't have any competition. And in those types of governments, people want corporations, they want corporate media, corporate education to basically rule everything. And this is what we have going on today in the United States. Then we have something called tyranny. And this is where we're going to. You read the radical rules here. The left in this country, they want tyranny. Now, tyranny is government or authority of an absolute ruler, arbitrary exercise of power over subjects, nor requisite for the purposes of government approved by law and justice. When you have a tyrannical government, you have a government that has absolute rulers. This is what the left wants in this country. This is where you get into communism. But communism starts from Marxism and socialism. Because when you have a tyrannical government, you basically don't have any freedom. And that moves on to totalitarian type of government, which a totalitarian style of government is one in which a single political authority regulates total control over the state that is centralized and dictatorial. That's what the left wants. The left wants government to run our lives because they believe government is going to make everything equal. So when you hear terms like multiculturalism, LGBTQ rights, you hear racism, you hear women's rights. It's code words for a totalitarian style government because what they want to do is they want to make everybody on the average everyday person's level equal, but the bureaucrats want to control everything. They want to centralize the economy, the healthcare system, the education system. And that leads to the 13th type of government called a federation. Federation is a political organization characterized by union of small states, groups of parties, which are self-governed in internal affairs and are united under a central government. And number 14, you got communism. Communism is a system of government. Communism is a system of government in which the state owns and operates industry on behalf of the people. And when you get to communism, you don't have any freedom. The government rules everything. Now, when we talk about socialism, the government will give individuals some options. But in socialism, the government decides how they're going to redistribute the resources. This is why the term egalitarianism is dangerous, because anybody talking about equal outcomes, you're talking about socialism. But when you get to communism, you're talking about total control over everything, the economy, the healthcare, your life. There is no freedom of speech. And then we get to a junta. Now, you don't hear this word as much. You can almost say that could be the Insurrection Act of 1807, to where the military rules everything. Well, a junta is basically a group or coalition that takes control of the state after overthrowing a government. Usually, this is done by military groups. Now, again, there hasn't been any of that here in the United States. But, a junta could be tied in to an anarchist, because if you have anarchy trying to bring down the current government, well, once that government is overthrown by anarchists who are lawlessness or who are lawless people, well, then you bring in what we call a junta. And that junta is basically going to take control after a previous government or governmental system has been overthrown. And then you bring in number 16, dictatorship. I almost said relationship, but when you have a dictatorship, there is no relationship between government and the people, because a dictatorship is where power rests entirely on one person or a group of persons. Now, this rule can be acquired by inheritance of force, and it is usually oppressive. Now, again, when we talk about all these systems here, I brought this to light because there are a number of ignorant people here in the United States. And many individuals in the United States are used to having it pretty good here. Many of them are used to having freedom. But it seems to me that a number of your ignorant people are glued to tyrannical types of government like socialism, communism. A number of them believe in fascism. They're anarchists. But individuals who believe in that type of government are very weak people. Because if you look at America as a whole, the republic is the best standard of government, because in a republic, you're supposed to have checks and balances. You have elected officials, but the elected officials are supposed to do what we ask them to do. The problem is, many of us here in America don't even understand what the Bill of Rights is. When you hear these politicians speak, they talk about rights, but they talk about human rights. The Bill of Rights and all of our laws were founded on a Judeo-Christian concept. But again, you have too many ignorant people that vote against the current system that we had, that was founded by the forefathers who wanted freedom. Now, one must ask, why would you want tyranny? Well, when it comes to people like Hitler, Hitler couldn't get into the Communist Party. So what was Hitler? He was a Nazi. Nazism is National Socialism, so that means Hitler was a socialist. Well, these individuals want to control the people, and they want to control the people by force. This is why you had 6 million Jews killed. You look at Pol Pot, he killed, I believe it was 60 million people in Cambodia. Don't quote me, but I do believe that many people were killed. And it's funny because the smart people, the ones who wore the glasses, they were killed first, because they had this belief that if you wore glasses, you were smart. The smart people are a threat. And see, people like me who fight for freedom, we're a threat to what's going on in this country, because I'm willing to fight for freedom. But you have a number of individuals who don't want to fight for freedom. They don't want to talk about anything. And here in this country, under a republic, we have freedom of speech. But when you have a number of individuals who don't understand what's going on when it comes to the style of governments, they're going to vote all of our rights away. This is why you see now, when we talk about the Second Amendment, because we believe that we have Democrats coming into power, you look at your guns. They're going off the shelves by the dozens. You look at your ammunition. They're going off the shelves. Why? Because when you have leftist Democrats who are coming to power, they want to take away all of our rights. And let me tell you how you know that we are moving further and further into a tyrannical government. When you hear of Green Deal, when you hear UBI, Universal Basic Income, single payer health care, redistribution of wealth, multiculturalism, LGBTQ, women's rights, black people who are treated like victims. When you hear masculinity going out the window, when you hear misandry, feminism, these are words for a tyrannical government that's coming. And when you have a tyrannical government, you lose all of your freedoms. And my job here on the 411 Talk Zone radio show is to give you insight about what's going on. Now, I'm going to give a shout out to a couple of people who are talking about this type of government. Shout out to Mr. Fantastic. Those guys, he has long streams, but when you listen to his information, those guys are well read. You check out my channel. You check out Will Johnson, Unite America First, ABL. Now, I don't listen to too many women's channels, but here are two women that I do recommend, Karen Kennedy and Patricia Dixon. Give them a shout out. Those individuals are right on everything. And Brandon Taylor, David Carroll is another one. And see, when it comes to African Americans, and I'm not putting us down, but African Americans, the reason why we always feel like victims, because we allow the government to be the solution for our lives, and the government gets to us emotionally. So what we do, we blame people for what we should be doing, because in the African American community, a lot of the problems that we have, we can solve ourselves, but we just won't solve them. And in the African American community, the people that are hurting us are a number of feminist black women, a number of simp black men, and some of these black men are older black men who are my age. Now, I'm 55 years old, and I don't sit on a plantation with the older black men. And some of you are going to thumb this video down. If I get one dislike, it's probably coming from the African American community, because I'm telling the truth, because a number of you African Americans don't want to deal with the truth because you're stuck in your feelings and you're stuck on a plantation and you know nothing about politics. So you want to come thumb down a video when you should be utilizing this video to educate yourselves. If you want to get out of your own turmoil, you need to do some reading. You need to get out in the streets to see what's going on. And you need to start a YouTube channel of your own, because too many African Americans sit on the side of the left. And what the left does to you African Americans out there is promise you everything and you get nothing. Now, you think you're winning by supporting the left? You're losing. Because what we should be doing in the African American community is understanding these types of governments and relying on each other instead of the government. Now, I know that many of us have gone through COVID. Let's talk about control. Well, for the most part, we all wear masks because of COVID. You can still get COVID by wearing a mask. But what the mask is basically used for, it's control. It's just another faction that we have to utilize to be controlled. And this COVID is basically a weapon so the left can put through their leftist policies to take away more and more of our freedoms. Now, I'm not saying COVID isn't real, but one must understand when we deal with wearing a mask every day, because I've seen videos where I saw a mother get arrested at a football game in Ohio because she didn't wear a mask. Saw another video where a mother in Dallas got arrested for not wearing a mask. I saw a woman in a store get stalked by a man who was telling her to wear a mask. Now, the big problem when it comes to individuals with a totalitarian mindset, most of those people are very ignorant people. They don't do any research for themselves. Now, one must understand when you get into a totalitarian style government, you're going to have individuals that are going to sound good and they're going to promise you the world. But in the end, once they get rid of all the threats, then they're going to take you out as well. Because for the most part, in the totalitarianism style of government, the bureaucrats rule. But many individuals don't understand that. Many individuals are stuck on their feelings. And the way the left wants to run this country is they want to put people against one another, old against young, men against women. They want to utilize the media, and the education that we have in this country is nothing more than school of indoctrination. You look at the individuals coming out of college and they're going to work for the media. Well, the corporate media is another school of indoctrination. You look at the celebrities, all these celebrities. And I like John Legend, good R&B singer, but he's been indoctrinated. He doesn't know what's going on. You look at LeBron James. He doesn't know what's going on. These individuals make millions of dollars, but they believe they're oppressed. You see, when you are a voter who's uninformed, you vote for oppressive government. Because, just like I mentioned before, when we talk about a republic type of government is one that's supposed to represent us. But a republic style of government is not oppressive. But if you go down and talk about a dictatorship, a theocracy, one that's filled with tyranny, you talk about communism, you talk about a dictatorship, those are oppressive governments. You have no rights. And there are a number of countries who have no rights. And what's going on now to try to get this country into the mold of a one world government, you have a number of individuals coming over here, going to schools here, and then they're going back to their countries, and then they're coming back over here living, and they're trying to bring their ways here into the United States to create within the United States by way of utilizing the politicians here by buying them. They want to turn this country into a tyrannical type of country, so we fit the mold of what's going on in England. Because in England, you got no rights. England and Canada, and I believe Australia, they're close with us, but they're socialist types of governments. Because you got socialized health care in England and Canada. Now, if you go overseas to the Middle East, you have a government known as a theocracy. And what did I say a theocracy was? Well, basically, when we deal with a theocracy, that's where you have priests ruling in the name of God. Or those types of officials are basically divinely guided. They believe in God. But here in this country, you got bad pastors, particularly some of the black pastors like Raphael Warnock. He sounds good, but he is a bad pastor, Reverend Wright. But in the interim, I want everybody to get out there and vote in Georgia, because the Republicans have to win those 2 Senate seats. Because if they don't, the left is going to run wild, and they're going to put all their silly left-wing views in place to create even more oppression in the United States. So, what you've just heard from me was information on 16 types of government and the ignorance of voters who will vote for oppressive governments because they don't know anybody. Because number one thing you should be fighting for is your freedom. Our forefathers, regardless of what you think about them, fought for freedom. They wanted to get away from monarchies. So, I want to ask you all this question. Do you want freedom or do you want tyranny? Tyranny is very dangerous. I want freedom, and I will continue to fight for my freedom, because the United States, although it has its problems, is still the best place to live, because here in the United States, you're free, for the most part, to do what you want to do and say what you want to say without any repercussions right now. But we still have liberty, and I prefer liberty over tyranny. And that's my commentary for this edition of the 411 Talk Zone radio show right here on YouTube. If you like what I just presented, please comment, share, and subscribe. And if you're looking for some STEM education, check out my Mind of STEM channel. On that channel, I'll give you a daily dose of science, technology, engineering, and math. And if you want more in-depth commentary on political subjects and STEM subjects, check out my Blog Talk radio show. In fact, tomorrow, since it's going to be New Year's Eve, I'm going to just focus on doing a couple Blog Talk radio shows before 2020 runs out. And in 2021, start off again. My birthday is this Saturday, January 2nd, so I might do a video there. But in the meantime, can't find me on Twitter, Blog Talk Radio. Check me, correction, if you can't find me on Blog Talk Radio or YouTube, check me out on Twitter. Blog Talk Radio telephone number is 215-383-5785. And at the end of the day, I'm going to leave you with this. Be blessed for what you have. Don't worry about what you don't have. Always know that the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. Now, folks, I don't ask for donations, but it'd be nice to have donations. I have a pen pal, a Venmo, and a Cash App. The links are below. Donate something so I can keep this channel going, so I can produce better content. And once again, like and share these videos, because this is one of the only channels where you're going to get true information about what's going on in society, and I'm going to teach you about how government works. But once again, thank you for listening to this edition of the 401 Talk Zone radio show right here on YouTube. Till next time, my name is Leon Jones. You all have a wonderful and blessed evening. God bless you. I'm out.